2021. I believe we have a couple council members joining us virtually. So our first presentation this evening is the city manager's presentation of the proposed budget for fiscal year 2021-2022. Mr. City Manager.
Okay, good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. My name is Zach Walker. I am the city manager for the City of Independence. And in accordance with section 8.2 of the city charter, it is my pleasure this evening to present to you the proposed budget for the fiscal year that would begin July 1, 2021 and run through June 30, 2022. The budget that I am presenting to you this year as a proposal totals $311,888,191, or a decrease of about $5.1 million, or approximately 2%. Before I get into my presentation tonight, I do want to express my sincere gratitude to our senior leadership team, the finance department, and our budget manager, Erica Benitez, who decided to triple her efforts this year, not only doing the budget, but moving cross-country to Independence during the pandemic. So this is my second time seeing Erica in person, so welcome to City Hall. Can't talk about the budget without very quickly talking about COVID-19. Last year, of course, this was thrust upon us right as we were concluding our budget development process. We worked together, both as council and staff, to navigate those waters. I am pleased to let you know that the council's authorization of the $25 million line of credit was not needed, as you've now rescinded that ordinance. And the $1.5 million COVID reserve also didn't come into play. Through strong fiscal management, we were able to navigate those waters within our existing operating and capital budgets, not needing either a reserve fund to make ends meet during the COVID-19 pandemic. But this is still a part of our daily life. As of last week, there are about 32.5 million confirmed cases that have occurred within the United States over the course of the last year or so. But things have started to turn. The United States is vaccinating about 3 million people per day. Health officials now estimate that herd immunity may be achieved as early as mid-July. The most optimistic scenarios before had that as late fall, sometime in September. So that appears to be accelerating forward. I saw statistics today from the governor's office that 80% of Missourians now live within 5 miles of access to a vaccination clinic. That said, about 34% of Missourians have received at least their first dose of the vaccine. So we are seeing some reduction in demand. That popularity has started to wane after the initial surge. And some concerns do exist about bottlenecks in production. You probably saw the Johnson & Johnson vaccine was temporarily delayed. So that kind of presents a little uncertainty about where we go with potential variants and other spikes down the road, something we have to at least keep in the back of our mind. But a lot of good news again, 6.6% positivity rate, way down from the 25 to 30% that we saw back late last fall and earlier this winter. On top of that, there has been a tremendous infusion of federal fiscal stimulus into the economy. Most recently, the American Rescue Plan, or ARP as it's known, has provided $1.9 trillion of stimulus both to citizens as well as to our municipalities, local and state governments. Congress is in the midst of debating the Build Back Better program, which is an infrastructure package. Anticipated timeline of later this year when that might be adopted, but $2 trillion for infrastructure and another $1 trillion in social benefits over the next 10 years. So again, tremendous amount of stimulus been pumped into the economy, which has certainly helped our position here in Independence as well. You can find a lot of different economists talking about a lot of different economic forecasts about how the recovery is going. The most common one I hear these days is a K-shaped recovery. And what that refers to is that for folks who are in an upper middle income and above bracket, by and large the economy has recovered for them. Almost all but 1 or 2% of the jobs that were lost at $60,000 and above have been recovered. But folks making $27,000 and less, that has not quite recovered yet. In fact, there's still 28% less jobs in that fiscal bracket than there was a year ago. So folks who are in the lower incomes are certainly still feeling the impacts of the economic downturn more so than folks in the upper end. Here's a quick look at unemployment. This continues to overshadow our financial position. Initial unemployment claims are beginning to tick down quite rapidly. They are still more than double the pre-pandemic levels, but they are starting to come back down. But there's still quite a bit of slack in the labor market. Continued claims are still near $4 million. I know that's something Councilmember Steinmeier pointed out in one of our budget presentations last year. That's that continued unemployment rate that's something to be mindful of. If we include those discouraged workers and the underemployed, those who are working part-time but want full-time employment, that unemployment rate is 75% higher than the official rate. So there's two different ways to look at this. We could take a pessimistic look at our economic position, or the glass half empty, if you will. Some things that if you're slanted towards the negative, things that you could use to bolster your argument. Vaccine demand is, as I mentioned, reducing. We've kind of vaccinated the folks who seem to have that initial desire. Those who are remaining may have some sort of hesitancy about becoming vaccinated, so we may have hit that higher end of folks who are seeking to become vaccinated. Again, the disruption in the distribution certainly presents some issues. Potentially some talk among public health officials about resurgent viruses and variants that may come about. Will that affect the economy? We don't know, but it's something to be mindful of. Inflation fears and higher interest rates. This is something that the Treasury Chair was speaking to the other day, that inflation may be ticking higher, and we may have to look at raising the interest rates to keep up with potential inflation. And then employment recovery. How quickly is that happening? There are some economists who take a pessimistic viewpoint and believe this may not occur until at least the second half of this decade, the 20s as they are. Regionally, that unemployment rate is still 1.5% above the pre-recession levels. And then a couple of the key indicators that we look at, consumer spending still down 24% compared to January 2020, and small businesses that are open 26% less, meaning there's been a 26% reduction in the number of small businesses here within our region. We could choose to be optimistic about the economy as well, though. There's enough data to support that viewpoint. Again, if herd immunity is achieved sooner than we anticipated. That pent-up demand, I put for home ownership here, but really we're seeing that across the board for things like cars, for things like appliances, for home repairs. This tremendous amount of fiscal stimulus is providing people the opportunity to make those sort of investments in their personal lives, and there's certainly capital and cash to be spent. Again, a lot of people have more savings because they haven't been able to do things like travel and other discretionary activities, so a huge boost of consumer spending may lay right around the corner. In that case, the recovery, some economists would tell you, could begin as early as the second quarter of this year, and I think there are certainly signs of that. Regionally, good news, we've recovered nearly 3/4 of the 143,000 jobs that we lost last year. That unemployment rate regionally is 1.3% below the U.S. average, so our economy regionally is stronger than the United States national average. Job postings have increased 32% compared to January of 2020. And our recovery is so much faster than what we saw in the Great Recession of 2020, probably in part due to the tremendous amount of fiscal stimulus. But so far, economic indicators are projecting that our recovery is 3 times faster than what we saw with the Great Recession. Very quickly with Missouri, again, this is some good news, bad news juxtaposition for you. Tourism, which is certainly a big part of the Missouri economy, this has taken a very hard hit. Tourism is a nearly $18 billion industry within the state of Missouri, but that economic impact fell to a 10-year low of $14.5 million in 2020. And the occupancy rates for hotel has exceeded 50% over the past 5 weeks, which isn't great, but compared to 20% 1 year ago, it's looking a lot better. Missouri economy is rebounding better than our peers nationwide. in terms of the employment and gross domestic product. The state is heavily reliant on the economies of the two large metros, and I must say the Kansas City metro is doing far better than the metro on the east side of the state. The uncertainty, however, around the post-COVID economy leaves a bit of uncertainty about where the economy will shake out, but Missouri's key industries, things like manufacturing, technology, entrepreneurship, have us on some solid ground for economic recovery in the near term. So this budget, with that backdrop, again, against COVID, against unemployment versus employment and versus consumer spending, is still based upon and has as its foundation Independence for All. The 5-year strategic plan that was recently readopted by the City Council in March of 2021 with our key goals of reducing crime and disorder, reducing blight, stabilizing and revitalizing neighborhoods, communicating more effectively, and a new priority for this year, enhancing public health, apropos given the past year that we've had. So the budget that I am submitting to the council tonight for fiscal year 21-22 is a hybrid of all of these different economic factors and using the term cautious optimism. Reasons to be optimistic, reasons to be pessimistic. We are taking a cautiously optimistic approach. 4 key principles and philosophies driving this budget. We have conservatively estimated our revenues. Certainly there are good positive signs out there, but I would rather be on the side of being overly surprised instead of overly shocked about where the revenues come in. So they are based on those historical trends with some of the COVID overlay brought in, so conservatively estimating those revenues. We are accurately budgeting for all known expenditures. All of our positions in this budget are fully funded, our known overtime costs, our known operating expenditures, all of those things that we know we have accurately budgeted for within this budget. And I do give a lot of credit to our budget team who has worked very hard to calculate and track those expenditures so we could account for those. We have addressed the City Council strategic priorities as outlined in Independence for All and as verified by our citizens in the citizen survey that we did last fall. Many of the key priorities, in fact, I think all of the key priorities that were brought to light by the council are funded in some form or fashion in this proposed budget. And as you will see, we are making strategic use of one-time revenues to further navigate that economic uncertainty. Certainly provides us a bridge, we hope a bridge to a more stable place, but it is a transition year and one that makes generous use of one-time revenues. So again, the proposed budget, $336 million, up 7% over the previous year. That was reduced significantly because of COVID-19. So though that 7% number looks big, that's because we're not only acclimating for our new expenditures, but then the catch-up from the costs that were reduced because of COVID. Again, fully funding all of the positions in the budget. None of this, vacant but frozen or exists but isn't funded stuff. These positions that you see are all fully funded in the budget. And again, we do not make any use of those pooled funds from the interfund loan, so there is no need for the $500,000 interest repayment that was going to be needed for the next 5 years. Some key pressure points that I'd like to highlight in this budget. Workers' comp charge increases. We are getting a better handle on our workers' comp program, but workers' comp works on a rolling several-year average, so because we've incurred costs from protecting our workforce, we do have about $1 million of cost increase associated with work comp in there to help the work comp fund. Health insurance is a cost that continues to go up, and a lot of credit goes to our Stay Well Advisory Committee, who's put in a tremendous amount of work, co-chaired by Mike Veet and Cindy Culp. They have worked with our new insurance advisor, CBIZ, to identify the need for a 15% premium increase, 10% of that funded in this budget, and then about $1.8 million coming from those American Rescue Plan dollars that I proposed to you. Retiree health insurance, that continues to be a big success story for us, a $120 million reduction in our post-employment benefits liability. I only bring this to bear tonight to point out to you that it will take time to fully realize the benefit of the leadership that the council a few years ago, in concert with our retiree group, that is still a $6.2 million expenditure in our budget. Over time, we'll see the full benefit of that kick in. So it takes time to realize that full benefit, but it is a path that we are well on now and something we can continue to feel good about. The ERP fund, this is the implementation of Munis, which I know the Audit and Finance Committee has been very diligent about ensuring gets completed this year. There are cost increases in there to help that get across the finish line. We have our state mandated premium increase for loggers in here, so that's a 1% increase. Again, we're part of a statewide consortium to fund our employee pension, which is what this loggers is. That's going to look a little bit larger in your budget, closer to 13%. The actual increase is 1%, but the way we are recording it with all of the other ancillary costs like overtime, et cetera, make it look larger than it truly is, but I wanted to highlight that for the council. I know public safety is a massive priority for this council and the community. The contractually obligated pay, salary, and benefit increases are in here, which we hope will further aid in our recruitment and retention efforts. That's about a $1.5 million increase. And then this is the final year of those COVID CDBG funds to help support our transit operations. The council will recall from last year, transit's a very highly subsidized operation in our city. We're making use of the CDBG funds to help support that subsidy for a very critical service for some of the more vulnerable in our community. Very quickly, just a general fund overview. As you'll see here in just a few moments, this is the first year that a budget is submitted to this council that has the waterfall from Proposition P, or the use tax, in that. So the general fund has $448,000 of new revenue from the Proposition P waterfall. That brings about a 1.5% increase in sales tax revenue. However, as we've talked about for several years, the traditional ways that local government, at least in Independence, have been funded are continuing to erode, and you're going to continue to see decreases in your cable and television franchise fees, as well as your fine and court costs from municipal court. As I mentioned earlier, this budget does make generous use of the federal stimulus dollars. An allowable use of those is revenue replacement, so between the health insurance costs and the general fund shortfall, there's $4.172 million of federal ARP dollars being used. As you'll talk about here in just a minute, this gives us a year to both see how does the economy continue to shake out in a COVID, partially post-COVID world, but also for this leadership team and this council to continue working on both managing our ongoing expenditures and finding ways to attract new revenue growth into the city. I'm proud of the work we've done to control our costs and even cut our expenses over the last few years. I do not believe we can continue cutting our way to prosperity, though, and I think revenue growth is going to be especially critical over the course of the next 2 months, or 12 months, unless we want to have to face that $3+ million shortfall this time next year. On the expenditure side with the general fund, that's about $78 million, or an increase of 5.3% over last year. Primarily, that's due to those pressure points on my last slide, things like workers' comp, overtime, fully funding our known expenditures. Notable changes, $295,000 for our streetlight consumption costs. This has been a big issue for our Public Utility Advisory Board, making sure that our actual streetlight costs are reflected in the budget. I don't know if my friend Bob Sorensen from Loggers is here tonight, but I would like to highlight for our retirees that the management advisory fees for our 457 plan, those costs are fully budgeted in here. So I know that was something that was concerning for the retirees last year. We've got that in here. An innovative idea that I'd like to credit our police department with, converting 6 police officer positions to cadets. You have to be a certain age to become a certified police officer in the state of Missouri. This will allow folks to qualify as a cadet, get into the program, start working their way through the academy, gets potential new recruits into our department and familiar with our staff, so that hopefully by the time they graduate the academy, they are not only ready to hit the street, but they're committed to the city of Independence and not a different firm that may have poached them in the time that they were in the academy. I know it was a priority of the council by resolution, I believe sponsored by Councilmember Stewart, to fund a neighborhood services manager for proactive code enforcement. That has been funded in here. Last year, after we were unable to do any across-the-board wage increases, we have the 2% across the board for all of our non-represented employees, which conversely matches the same amount that has been negotiated with those groups who have their contractual obligations for this coming fiscal year. That certainly helps both with retention of our workforce as well as morale. And then finally, last year we had a $1.5 million COVID contingency. This year I put in just over $300,000. Mostly this was if unknown expenses related to COVID or some surprise revenue fell through, we would have a little bit of a cushion. That should show that, again, we believe we're starting to turn the corner economically, at least in terms of COVID. But I still think it's important to have a little bit of a contingency to help us should unforeseen issues arise. This is a graph that shows our general fund balance. By council resolution, we should try to be hitting 16% of revenue. The proposed budget has that at 8.7%. I know that doesn't sound great, but just a few years ago, that number was closer to 2%. So over the last few years, we have steadily climbed our way to where we're just shy of 9% now. However, if we don't address some of those structural issues that I referenced earlier, you can see that that fund balance would dip to about 1.9 million next year and then run negative in fiscal year 23-24. So I put this in here to just highlight that this is the important sense of urgency that we should have for implementing these revenue growth and cost management strategies heading into the next few fiscal years. As I mentioned, this is the first year where we'll see the waterfall of the use tax, or Proposition P, $44.5 million subject to the online sales tax. And because we are now able to fully fund the animal shelter obligation, which is $762,000, as well as the funding for the up to 30 new police officers, which is just slightly over $3 million, the total revenue from all funds is $4.8 million, we're estimating. So you can see where we believe all of our sales taxes will benefit with the waterfall in the year ahead. Very remarkable. Did not expect this to happen this fast, and certainly helps our budget situation in the year ahead. So this just reflects where our sales tax growth is at. Again, it looks partially better because of the suppression from COVID last year, but it's really driven by the fact that we have that revenue growth because of Proposition P and the waterfall. This is the first year where we will have the Health and Animal Services Department. The council gave staff direction to go pursue recertification of a local public health agency. Working with our legislators and our lobbyists in Jefferson City, we were able to achieve that recognition from the state. So this budget has the reestablishment of the Independence Health Department with the baseline funding in there. We hope that additional grant dollars will come in future years from the state, but we don't have those in here yet because we don't know that for certain. So because of that, we are again using some of those American Recovery Plan dollars to help prop up this budget. $150,000 for this year and $150,000 for next year. We will need those long-term resources beyond those next 2 years, though, and that's where we'll work with our state delegation and our lobbyists to try to secure those grant dollars. We're proposing combining Animal Services Department with this new health department as it was before we folded the or reorganized the health department a few years ago. So this just brings back, by and large, that same model that we had prior to 2018. I just want to brag on our newly established health department for just a moment. In the first 2 months of having the COVID-19 clinic open, they've delivered over 15,000 doses of the vaccine at the clinic at the Independence Center. 10,000 of those just in the last few weeks of April. So they have been very busy out there and certainly made life-changing impact on the Independence community. We need to highlight the enterprise funds, which are the water, wastewater, and electric utility funds. I am forecasting limited revenue growth due to COVID-19 and limited expansion. Both our industry growth and our residential growth remain stagnant. And then with people moving to more energy efficient practices in their homes and businesses, we just don't forecast tremendous revenue growth across the three utilities. So we are proposing a strategic drawdown from the fund balances in the sewer and water funds. Per the cash resiliency policies, we will be spending down some of those excess reserves to support operations and capital for the sewer and water funds, and then careful strategic management of power and light over the course of the next year. That fund is made whole with its operating expenses. It is the capital expenses where we are beyond what our revenues are bringing in. So we are using or proposing to use our reserves to help fund those capital projects, but throughout the course of the fiscal year, we'll be monitoring our revenues and only bringing those projects to the council at the time we either feel they're necessary and urgent, or at the times that we feel like revenue is sufficient to support those projects. So that will be very strategic month-to-month management of the electric utility. We will need to continue monitoring our operating expenses as well. I know we've discussed with the council the need to do some sort of a staffing plan and review at Power and Light. We are in the midst of that. Just takes a little longer to do that when we're doing that in-house. So we're working our way through that, and we'll plan to continue making adjustments to our operating expenses via the staffing plan as the fiscal year moves on. But a couple of highlights for you. The water fund, we're going to accelerate our main replacement program, which will help ensure the reliability and stability of our water main transmission and distribution system for years to come. If you saw what Kansas City's experienced the last few years with their main breaks and then the associated cost increase, we're trying to stay ahead of that. The sewer fund, many of our Eastern Independence residents are actually under the governance of the Little Blue Valley Sewer District. They have a $450,000 rate increase that we have to adjust for, so that is funded in this budget. And then $184,000 for 3 FTEs for an infiltration project, which will help with our environmental compliance in the sewer utility. So just looking ahead, the final slide here, it's very important that we continue to build a financially sustainable budget. We cannot really begin to attack our other strategic priorities until we know that our finances are stable. I've identified 5 options of what we can do over the course of the next year and beyond. There may be other ideas that come to light, but we'll need to do either one or some combination of these to continue managing our financial position. We're going to have to make strategic changes to the legacy expenditures that we have that are growing at unsustainable rates. For example, our health benefits. Health insurance is a very important issue for our city, for our employees. But every organization, public and private sector, is being faced with astronomical increases in their health insurance costs. That is a cost that we're going to have to figure out how to manage so that we can have the resources to provide services for our citizens as well. The leave payouts, the sick leave, vacation leave, these are legacy expenses that as long-term tenured employees retire, these are costs that we have to incur, so they're ones we're going to have to figure out how to manage through to meet our obligations. And then other benefit costs that are associated with employment at the city as well. We'll figure out attracting and retaining the kind of industry that meets market demand. I saw today that the cities that are coming back strongest from the economic downturn are those cities that were facing technology, entrepreneurial, and manufacturing investments in their city. Cities like Des Moines and Denver and some of those other cities that come to mind. We need to begin attracting those kind of employers to our city and transition away from a retail and service sector strategy for economic development and towards the kind of jobs that will provide employment for our residents and economic development in our community. That's how we'll get revenue and rooftops in our city. We may need to pursue revenue growth through ballot initiatives, things like Senator Rizzo's fire sales tax initiative or other levy opportunities that may exist. Those are conversations that we should have with this council and with our community. We need to evaluate our citizen demand for services and strategically decide where we should invest our resources in a way that they align with that demand for services. There are places in this organization where I think resources are far short of the demand for service, and there are places where resources exceed the demand for service, and it's our responsibility as staff to bring that to you through performance data so that you can make those kind of decisions as a governing body. And then an option, certainly not one I would recommend, is making those across-the-board reductions to the already meager workforce, which is not going to be good. That is going to strain our ability to provide the services in a community where we're already strained to do that. So I think we all know we need to focus on those revenue growth and strategic cost containment opportunities. So with that, it has been my pleasure to work with our staff over the last few months developing this budget, getting the strategic input from this council. We will be available for the next 45 days to answer questions leading up to the June 21st consideration of adoption of the budget. So with that, Madam Mayor, I will answer any questions we have tonight.
Okay, thank you. Mr. City Manager, questions?
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Yes, Councilman Huff?
Mr. City Manager, caught that on the street light, 295. So have we been paying 295? Or are we starting to pay 295? Can you tell us a little bit more about that street light money there?
Yeah, it has ebbed and flowed over the years, council member. There were, but as of recently, no, that was a cost that was not fully budgeted in here or being, that transfer happening. So we are making certain, via the feedback we've gotten from the Citizens Advisory Board and the council, that that cost is fully accounted for in this budget.
So you're saying it has not been paid until this time? For how many years?
You know, there were years prior to my service as city manager where I think an arbitrary number was passed along, and I don't know that it was math-based. It was more ability-based. My philosophy a few years ago was to end the gamesmanship and just, you know, say, you know, we'll pay for cost but not consumption. Concerns have been raised that I felt were valid and important to recognize, and that's why we have worked with Power and Light staff to identify the true consumption costs, and we'll be paying those starting this year.
So I'm glad to see that. I'm just wanting to know. So initially, the street lights were, I think it was set at $500,000 to pay for the actual lights. And I didn't never see that happen. But so now this is just the consumption end of it, or is this to help repay Power and Light for the street lights that they took on, the initial cost of the actual fixture?
This is the consumption only. This is reflective of what our planned consumption costs are going to be for the next 12 months. Does not have any of the upgrade to the system costs that happened 5 or 6 years ago. You may recall better than I do when that was.
Okay, thank you. It's I'm glad to see we're taking care of that. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, other comments or questions?
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
Mr. City Manager, if a citizen has a question, and you probably said it and I missed it, when is the public hearing for the
Yeah.
citizens to ask questions?
The public hearing is next Monday night. At the regular meeting of the council, there will be a public hearing advertised and citizens can come and speak. I need to confirm with the clerk quickly. Do citizens need to sign up for that, or can they? No, they can just show up and speak without signing up. So
Okay, and is the budget, the proposed budget, is it online so they can take a look at it and
It is.
study it?
correct.
Okay, final question. I noticed that there's a budget line detailed by department.
Yes.
I don't understand how will I know that something from fire on page 134, am I gonna be able to cross-reference it to the line item? I don't understand how the budget line item, 68 pages works.
Yeah, right. So those two don't, by total, by department, they would marry up. But what you're looking at in the larger budget document is going to be by what we call cost center or division within a department. So there may be the street crimes unit of the police department in the big budget book. In the supplemental document, it will drill down on the costs of salaries, health insurance, pencils, paper.
If I wanted to know, under finance, $177,000 for memberships, where do I look to find out what that $177,000 pays for?
Yeah, we would want to drill down within the right cost center of the line item budget to see what specific membership was being proposed with those dollars. So the gross total number is going to be in the operating budget document, and then the detail behind that's going to be in the line item supplement.
But am I gonna have to look in each department on the line item in order to understand where the 177 comes from?
Yeah, we'll have, because that's the way it's accounted for in the department's budgets for things
Okay.
like memberships, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Other comments and questions?
Mayor,
Yes.
thank you. So COVID throws everything off, right? So good job putting this thing, good job to staff kind of forecasting and working with this. In years past, we had like a kind of a town hall. Are we anticipating doing like a cyber town hall for whoever?
Yeah, so in the past, we had, as you're referencing, Councilmember, a public meeting for the citizens to come, and we would do this same presentation.
Sure.
What I'm proposing to do this year, because of some of the COVID stuff, is having this presentation online, and then we are working on developing a survey instrument so citizens can weigh in on some of these proposals and let us know, yeah, good job, or no, you're an idiot, we don't need to do that. I hope they don't say that. But that's, we're trying to do the town hall via a survey instrument this year where they can interact on their time and at their convenience with us, but by asking very pointed questions about things within the budget.
For sure.
And then we are also, in the past, have done our budget town hall. This is more internally, but I just want to let folks know with our employees. And we're doing that sometime this week, or next week with our employees, the following week. So we'll, over the lunch hour, do an online presentation where employees can either listen in or watch the tape later.
Well, I appreciate you doing that. That's always been since you've taken your leadership position, having that open door and having those questions able to be out there, and you taking some shots and standing up and answering those questions candidly. That's a big kudo. So, us as a city council, we have a lot of stuff to ponder here and to look at and to evaluate, and because this has been another one of those years that's been unprecedented. So, a couple things. One, as a council, how do we make these tax revenues come into the city through the development? So we got our work cut out for us to help attract those businesses, work with our IEDC to get these businesses and stuff in here. But I'm also a big advocate of, as I look around, Truman Library is one that put a tremendous amount of investment in their tourism there to try to draw that money into the city. So as we go forward, being strategic with how we spend our capital projects to develop those areas of tourisms and repeat spending and getting that dollar turned around here for sure. So looking at these numbers and looking at the budget, as you guys project 3 years, 5 years out, how accurate and how are you able to do that with any certainty with the economy and consumer confidence and all of that? Is that
there's certainly going to be a degree of forecasting and guesswork involved in that. What we try to do is go look at the previous few years and see what our historical growth has been, both in terms of our revenues and our expenditures, and then project those both forward, with an average of what that growth has been, and sort of growing at that same rate moving forward the next 5 years. Obviously, any number of factors can throw that off. If we had a major employer come to town and the median income went from $52,000 to $72,000, that's going to be a game changer. If we went from 120,000 residents to 180,000 residents, that's a big game changer. If a major employer leaves town, like we saw the last year with 4 major retailers closing their doors, that's going to drive things to the negative, the wrong direction. So this is only looking at what has happened in the past and projecting that forward. But that's where I urge that sense of proactive nature to try to drive that in case, to build against those potential detrimental downturns that may loom on the horizon.
So if I heard you correctly in doing the reading here, if we're facing these same scenarios next year, minus the influx of cash that we receive from our federal government, we'll be looking at a $3.2 million shortfall.
Had we not had these dollars from the American Recovery Plan, the general fund, as it were, would have been short $3.2 million, and we would have had to find some sort of cost-cutting mechanisms, combination of, that would have led to $3.2 million savings.
So in essence, that we need to start working on our budget tomorrow.
We do, and there is that hope that COVID will stop in its entirety, and all that pent-up demand that's been happening with people sitting on cash, that you'll start to see that infusion of cash back in the economy, that people will travel and they'll go out to eat. And I think we are starting to see that. I mean, if you've been out to eat lately, it takes a while to get food because it's taken a while for the service sector to start to rehire. And then there's whole other conversations about, are they going to be able to retire with the level unemployment benefits are at, you know? So that's a whole other conversation, but the point being, it's going to be hopeful some cash infusion is coming as the economy starts to loosen and those restrictions fully lift. But then there's also just reality of some of those structural issues that have always existed in our budget and that COVID has only exacerbated the crumbling of those issues.
Well, since there hasn't been, well, the Recovery Sales Outlet with their initiative there, with their major investment they're looking at to do, I don't see anything major coming on the horizon. So where we need to be is to position ourselves to recoup those funds from tourism when those individuals are ready to get out and start moving back into looking at our historic sites. So this is something that we really need to focus on and be strategic with that. At least start capturing those dollars and creating an experience that can be distributed back out to the country, letting people know that we got something special here, which we do.
Right. You know, to your point, the reopening of the library I think is going to be exciting and hopefully brings a lot of folks either for the first time or back to the library that they maybe haven't been to for several years. You know, we need to get our sites all fully open, the Trails Museum, et cetera. All those things that make independence, we need to open the doors so folks can come and see it, as you say. Hopefully, you know, the intermediate to longer term play needs to be rooftops. You know, we need permanent people living here, but the immediate first step is just get people into town. Get them into town, spending money, visiting, staying the night, eating, et cetera.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for putting this together. Looking forward to hearing some more public comment and kind of see how this moves forward.
Of course.
Okay, other comments or questions?
Madam Mayor?
Yes, Councilman Hobart?
Either one.
Oh,
Go ahead.
go ahead.
Mr. Walker, so looking at the forecast page, we've clearly got some changes coming from the general fund. Are some of those, is some of that deficit we have coming up from TIF call dates and that kind of thing?
You know, we've worked really hard to try to find ways to pay for those TIF obligations that don't use general fund revenue. So the, whatever you want to call it, appropriation fund or sinking fund, that's the strategy to where we won't have to use general fund dollars. So that is not reflected in here. What you're seeing more in that is the true cost of doing business. In years past, and I don't mean to sound patronizing here, but the budget has kind of been put together with savings by not fully funding positions or deferring capital or things like that. We built a budget that's, I would say, more based on reality here of showing what that true cost of doing business is. So that number looks scary, and it is scary. We're able to dance around the issue this year, like I said, because of the recovery plan dollars, but that should put on everybody's horizon and telegraph that we have work to do to fully fund the way we're doing business today.
So this, it really will be a reflection of increased cost versus potentially decreased revenue.
Yeah, we just, it is, and you know, I've talked to the council over the years, it is imperative to pay for and honor the obligations that we've got and get those addressed, but it's also imperative to find new ways of doing it. And that's why, like, for example, I highlighted the retiree health insurance. We've got good change coming in the future. We're about 7 decades away from seeing the full benefit of that.
Sure, I understand that. Well, I appreciate very much the, I'll call it transparency, the increased transparency or honesty in our budget. You know, that's a thing I think we probably all hear from citizens from time to time. Well, you know, the city has accounts, the city switches money back and forth, the city doesn't pay for the right thing out of the right fund. And if what I'm hearing you say is that this is a real genuine effort to sort of knock some of that off.
It is. And I would say that's been a multi-year effort to get there, to really fully grasp those costs. Certainly the upgrade with the new financial system, the Munis that we've talked about, and audit and finance, that has helped. But yeah, I think we're finally at a point now where we fully understand their obligations. Now we have to understand how we fully fund those obligations.
Well, I sure appreciate the effort, and it can't feel good to put together a budget, especially with forecasting that looks like this. So I very much appreciate it, on behalf of the residents too, of your office, doing this. So thank you.
Councilman Steinmeier?
Thank you. Mr. City Manager, this forecast in terms of revenue, are we forecasting kind of in a pre-COVID business model?
It's a hybrid, council member. The best way I know to describe it is that term hybrid. So it does use as a baseline some of the revenues from prior budgets and the growth from year to year, the average growth, but then it takes into account the fact that, we have sunk that growth because of COVID. It takes into account that major employers like Macy's and Penny's and others, Barnes & Noble, have shuttered their doors. So we try to pull all the information that we've got together. Historical averages are a part of it, but then it's weighted against the economic downturn and the business closures and opening. Some new businesses opened their doors this year, but certainly I think we can realistically say we lost more sales tax than we gained in terms of doors open.
So when you started forecasting and looking at this, just to give folks a time frame, what months did you work on this?
We really start the budget in earnest right after we had that council strategic planning session back in August. That's when we got the big 5 priorities that the council said, we really want to see you try to get these 5 things funded in the next year and make some headway on those. So we started to try to work around that. Revenues were really more of a product of the year-to-year growth. Now we know that historically Independence has seen good sales tax months in August with back to school, November and December with Christmas, and then usually the March, April time with Easter, and so some of those holiday sale things. So we try to look at the prior year and see how well did we do in terms of that. And I think it will come as a surprise to no one that last year was not good, both because of COVID and the convenience of doing everything I just mentioned online.
Right. I'm curious as, are we going to continue until we vote on this? Are we going to continue to kind of look in the crystal ball and track revenues a little better? Because a lot has changed even since January. I mean, gas prices are up 50 cents a gallon. Food costs are going up astronomically, and most of that's because of logistics worldwide. Just getting goods and services from one location to another, it's stifled. Car sales are in trouble, because of a chip.
Yeah.
Those are things that I worry about. Inflation, deflation, we got stagflation, we've got all that going on. And it's your job to bring the optimism to us, right?
Right. Sure.
But then you got the old gray-headed guys sitting there going, oh my gosh, I want to be optimistic, I do. But
I put cautious optimism for you.
You did put cautious optimism, and I appreciate that, I do. But the reality of it is we're heading into a future, and it's coming quickly towards us, I think, that are going to really impact our revenues. And we've got to get the city back to 100% again. We've got to get it opened up, or we're going to really be struggling financially. I thought you had a hard job last year, but I think I told you I really don't envy you next year too.
Right. You did.
Because it's going to be really, really difficult.
You did, yeah.
And I think we're going to start seeing more of that. So I would like to know that as we have this massage time of this budget, that your team's going to keep looking at and forecasting based on things we're seeing and we've seen since January.
Yes,
And
yes, sir.
and the
Yep.
things we're hearing about even today.
Yeah, we will definitely keep working with the council over the next 40, 45 days leading up to adoption and adjust as necessary in that period.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Couple things. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. To kind of go along with what Councilman Steinmeier was saying, you did a great optimistic, kind of cautious look, but I would also mention to my colleagues here, if this happened this year without that infusion of cash, we're looking at 3.2 million shortfall And that could be a possible look next year too, that even though the city manager and staff puts these numbers and crunch them and gives them the best massages possible, we're the ones that gotta vote on that and make that package happen, for sure. And as much as we wanna get this place up and open and our economy's rolling, our friends in Congress in Washington with some of the relief packages has absolutely stifled. Why would you want to go back to work if you can make more money collecting unemployment? When I was in Branson, a lot of the major chains are down there are facing the exact same thing. Applebee's down there is closed 3 days a week, not because they want to be, they just don't find the help. Nobody wants to come back to work. So, I mean, we have to work in conjunction with our friends in Washington that some of the policies you set up there that looks good at that level sucks down here, and you've got to get that figured out. That's my high horse.
Mr. City Manager, I had a couple of things,
Sure.
Notes that I had taken. I know that you have included the $20 million that the city has received directly in ARP funding into this budget, and as we've all said, thank goodness we have that money to get us through this fiscal year. What's not projected, I don't think, anyplace is the billions of dollars that are still out there, both at the state level and at the federal level, that we still have an opportunity to access some of those funds and have been actively working with our neighboring cities in the region to come up with understanding what that process will be at the state level, and then, of course, looking up to the federal level is how do we access some of that funding. And a lot of that is, it's not sustained money. We all understand that. This isn't money that's going to be available year after year. But so there is some one-time expenditures that can be taken care of, probably some big ticket items that we've had on our list for quite some time that we can address. I know utilities, and especially the electric utility, is one of those items that there is, the governor has indicated that there would be money available for capital improvement projects that stabilize the grid, which we can certainly use, as well as relief not only to the customers to get caught up in paying their bills, but also direct relief to the utility for the contributions that we have made with the ratepayers' money to be able to help out in stabilizing that. So that's my word of optimism, is that there is a lot more money out there, and we will find ways to aggressively pursue it and understand those processes so that we are close to the front of the line in accessing those funds. You know, I'm always much more in favor of making money than cutting. I would like, I know we had asked our Advisory Board of Health, and you referenced it briefly, to take a look at the health levy to see if there might be an opportunity there to help to fund our newly formed Independence Health Department. So I'd like to get an update, you know, from them if the research that they've conducted so far, and bring forward a recommendation of do something, don't do something, wait, whatever it might be. I noticed in transportation, which was, you know, a real close shave when COVID hit, about being able to maintain our bus service. And thankfully, due to some CARES Act money that we were able to access through the KCATA, we were able to do that for a period of time. I just noticed, and I wanted to draw it out because I don't want people to be terribly concerned, that it is decreased by $500,000, but I want to make sure people understand that that's not a reduction in service. That's just simply a reduction in demand. So that's what we're getting billed because of the decrease in demand. Is that accurate to say?
Yeah, service is not impacted in this budget whatsoever, Mayor. You're right.
Okay. And to Councilman Perkins' point, And I feel like one of the unaddressed, one of the items that we still have yet to address during this COVID crisis is the unemployment and the lack of people being able to hire folks so that they can fully reopen and be able to generate that sales tax that we're depending upon. And, in report after report that I've read, it's mothers of young children are the ones who are being most severely impacted with unemployment. Not only maybe they don't want to come back to work, but they are not able to come back to work because they're at home taking care of their children while their children are not in daycare or not in school. So I don't know how much of an impact we as the city council are going to have on that, but I am very pleased to hear from many people that our school districts, Independence and Fort Osage in particular, are really held up as the best in the region in being able to bring the kids back to school, to control the situation. And, I just wanted to give a little bit of a compliment for sure to our Independence School District and Fort Osage School District and the great job that they've done to not make that situation even worse than it currently is. We all see it. We see it in our hospitality business, our hotels. I mean, they don't have housekeepers, they don't have servers in the restaurants. We know that our restaurants are suffering. We know that our retail outlets are suffering, and lots of industries are suffering because those women who have young children just are struggling to be able to come back to work. So, I think that's just something that we need to keep in mind as we look forward to this and continue to take the measures that we need to take from a public health standpoint to make sure that we can do our best to help support getting those kids back in school and getting daycare centers open that were forced to close, private daycare centers, and supporting those early childhood workers, well, as we're looking at this too. And I think that will make a big impact. So those were the only comments that I had. Are there any other comments or questions on the proposed budget?
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
I don't have a question necessarily for the proposed budget, but looking at transportation needs, I believe Councilwoman DeLucy and Councilman Hobart and myself are on the Transportation Committee. That perhaps this may be a good time to get with city manager staff and set up a meeting and see what we need to look at for the future. Kind of start discussing that, get that process going.
Okay. If there's no other comments or questions, we'll move on to our next presentation, which is Winter Storm, Episode 4, IPL Marketing, Market Operations.
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'm going to go ahead and have our PIO set this up, and Mr. Nail's on his way.
Okay, very good.
Evening, Mayor, council members, Jim Nail, Director of Power and Light. As I said, once again, here to talk about the winter storm impacts and address some of the questions and issues that were raised last time. Most notably, the questions that came up during the session 2 weeks ago. What was our peak load compared to how much generation we were able to get during the winter storm? How much did wind and solar contribute? How did they perform during that period? discuss the IPL and SPP relationship, how we function with Southwest Power Pool, how can IPL manage market risk to prepare for next time, and a question of could we stretch out the recovery cost over a longer period. So to address those, first of all, the question of load versus generation from February 11th through February 19th, our total generation did fall short of IPL's customer load, the energy demand that we supply every day. A lot of that was due to fuel shortages and weather issues. Obviously the natural gas issue we all know about is the main driver of a lot of the problem. There were also problems getting delivery of fuel oil because everybody that could switch to oil was doing so, and so that put a strain on the delivery service for getting fuel oil. The weather impacted everything, even the coal plants, because when coal sitting out in the piles, when it gets weather like we had during that week, the pile itself freezes up and you have even more effort, more work to bust that up and get it into the crushers and up to the plant and deliver it for fuel. The wind farms, obviously they were impacted. They actually performed a little better than forecast, and I'll show you that on a slide here later. But the wind was down during that period, so they weren't generating a lot. And with the overcast skies, solar just wasn't much of a factor either. Nebraska City 2 performed well, but they were limited due to just coming out of a maintenance period and had a limit on how much they could run their unit. As I said, wind energy was well below the rated capacity, but did perform at projected levels. For our internal units, we did have one of the 6 turbines that was out of service, and we had been working with GE to try to come up with a solution prior to the event, and it was sometime after that we finally got that one back in service. This chart here shows some of the numbers. The difference between peak demand and the generation that we produce, it varies from hour to hour. Here's some of the worst of it, the 15th to the 17th, and you can see that starting on the evening of the 15th, we were negative throughout that stretch. The highlighted in yellow shows those hours, as much as 20 megawatts during a couple of time periods. You can see on there the wind. Councilman Huff pointed out that we have over 30 megawatts of agreements with wind. But out of that 35, Southwest Power Pool only accredits 10.7 just because of the variable nature of that resource. And through that event, you can see it was as low as 1 hour, even 0. But 1 megawatt total from those 2 wind farms on a couple of those hours. Solar, again, was negligible. There was snow and ice that was involved, but even if some of those had been cleared off for most of that period, skies were overcast. You can see even back at the 8th of February, it was negative on those days as well. We did talk to MC Power, and they did have, Higginsville has one of their solar farms, and Higginsville did send out some people to clean off snow and ice. MC Power does not have the staff to do that themselves. Our estimate after talking to them is it would take 4 employees approximately 13 hours to clear off the panels that we have. With the combination of snow and ice that was on the panels, we would have had to use tools that they specified, and we would have been at risk, liable for any damage done to those panels trying to chip the ice off. In addition, there was snow repeatedly during the event, so once we cleared it off the first time, we would have had to go back and do the same thing multiple times. Also keep in mind that we have a inclement weather clause in our work agreement with IBEW, and in the conditions that were present during that period, it would have had to take an emergency declared by the city manager to, if folks didn't want to go out into that kind of cold, it would have taken an emergency to have them out there. So this shows you just shows you the picture. Then we were at a deficit. We had our units were running. Dogwood limited by gas. Iatan performed well throughout the period. Nebraska City limited by their maintenance. Wind and solar just didn't contribute much. Here's a graph that just illustrates the nature of our wind generation. The blue line at the top is how much load was on the system. The red line is the nameplate capacity. If at approximately 3.5 megawatts per wind turbine, all those turbines out there in Southwest Power Pool are rated for a total of 27.5 gigawatts, 27,000 megawatts. The best that SPP has recorded so far is only 21. So even under the best conditions, they're falling short of the rated capacity of the wind. And then the actual wind that was coming in that day, you can see is far down, far below the green line. And that's simply just the nature of wind. That's one of the reasons why under FERC rules, wind and solar are rated lower than their 100% capacity because they just don't generate at that level on a typical hour. As far as our relationship with Southwest Power Pool, just a little history. Southwest Power Pool was founded in 1941 during the war. It was a cooperative agreement that was done in order to keep some strategic facilities powered all the time. Coming out of that, they figured that worked pretty well, having all the utility band together like that. So SPP continued. In 1970, Independence joined Southwest Power Pool. Southwest Power Pool providing transmission coordination throughout the region. In 1997 is when Southwest Power Pool was approved as a reliability coordinator, which means they took on responsibility for managing the reliability of the system across the whole region. In 2004, the NERC requirements became mandatory, and Southwest Power Pool was approved as a regional transmission organization. And yet just increased the amount of responsibility they had and the authority that they had over the system in this region. In 2009, Southwest Power Pool created what was called an energy imbalance service. As the transmission organization responsible for the area, they're working with all the agencies in the area to keep load and generation in balance and to help facilitate that. So that was what the energy imbalance service provided. In 2014, they took it a step further. They became the balancing authority for the entire region. They control the generation up and down. But they also did, by doing so, they created the integrated market, which enabled them to pool all those resources, schedule the most cost efficient, and make that benefit available to the members that signed on. SPP just recently put out a press release, said that their annual report says that they are providing $2.14 billion in annual savings for the pool, approximately a 14-to-1 benefit to cost ratio for the services they provide. And they're able to do that because of the volume that they work with. This shows just what the benefit has been for us, just in the area of our purchase power. Back as far as 2008, our average cost for power was $84.56 per megawatt hour. After we joined SPP's integrated market, you can see it's dropped down into the 20s. So we're less than a third of the energy cost that we had when we were trying to market it ourselves. So being a member of Southwest Power Pool and taking advantage of their coordination and their scheduling has definitely benefited us in the amount of money we have to spend for our purchase power. Now, taking advantage of that does come at a cost. We have responsibilities as a member of the pool. I've included a couple of paragraphs from the Integrated Market Protocols, the document that we signed on to become a member of the Integrated Market. As a member of that market, It includes mandatory market participation. Once you sign on as a member, you're in, and you have requirements that you have to meet on a day-to-day basis. The day-ahead market, the real-time balancing market, and then what's referred to as reliability unit commitment. The day-ahead market is what we all forecast we're going to need tomorrow. The reliability unit commitment is if it looks like there's going to be a shortage somewhere, they will schedule some units in advance. And then the real-time balancing is the things that happen just from hour to hour. We have a must-offer requirement. We have to offer, the units that we have available have to be offered into the system. We get to set the price based on our costs, and those are also audited, but we have to offer what we have available unless it is in an approved outage. The day-ahead market, each participant with a registered load has to satisfy that offer obligation. There's an independent monitoring function. SPP they're a pass-through. I mean, they're a revenue neutral organization, so they're matching up the buyers and the sellers. But there's a independent market monitoring function that takes a look at that, that determine if everybody's playing fair. Are we complying with the terms of the integrated market agreement? And as noted there, they're watching for compliance with market rules and preventing the exercise of either horizontal or vertical marketing power, us making decisions which influence unfairly the market. The market monitor, it looks at our load, our operating reserve obligation, offered resources, net resource capability for every asset owner and for each hour of the operating day. So it is an hour-to-hour review. If you are found to be non-compliant, if you've either not forecast your load properly, or if you've not offered in the resources that should be available, then you can be penalized. You can be found non-compliant and face sanctions. We discussed this with MPUA, the Missouri Public Utility Alliance, and they agreed that unfortunately there is no opt-out provision for participation. If you're in, you're in. You can't take advantage of the good pricing in times when the market's favorable, and then take yourself out when you think you can get a better deal somewhere else. From MPUA's council that we corresponded with, the quote there, unfortunately, there's no opt-out provision for participation if you don't like the prices. And I'm not sure there's any real hedging or bid offer strategy you could implement to specifically address the type of event we experienced. Their opinion was that maintaining a diverse portfolio of resources with alternate fuel sources, that flexibility is the best protection we have against a scenario like that. Pending your questions, that's our response to last time's questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Nail. Questions?
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I'm kind of confused by what we're looking at. My questions were more in line with what our gas prices were kind of leading into February. You know, looking at what SPP's communication was, I wanted to ask you about some of the communication that was coming out. They said that they were communicating the first week of February with the members, and that would be us, correct? That there was a storm coming, and they were telling us, get ready. And they were telling us to, they said to begin husbanding our resources. And they're giving us time because time is required for folks just like us that need longer startup time. So they had us online. Did we get those communications?
We did get communications about the pending weather. They put out what they referred to as they declared conservative operations, some other warnings. Our staff went out and looked for fuel oil contracts to basically top off the tanks that we have, so that we would have the alternate fuel available.
Well, and how many, just remind everyone, how many of our CTs use natural gas and fuel oil?
The 4 units at sub I and J are oil only, and the 2 at H are dual fuel. They can use either gas or oil.
And which one is not functional right now? Or wasn't?
What,
in
one of the
operation?
ones at J. J2 was one of our smaller units. It wouldn't start at the time.
Yeah, my SPP is now, they've put together a group that is looking as a committee, that they're gonna do their own internal investigation on their process, because it went south on us pretty fast. And they're putting together this group, but they're not prepared to do a report. They feel like that their report won't be ready till July. Were you aware of that?
Right.
So asking for a few weeks to just do basically the same type of internal look at what we did or did not do, I think is more in line with what we're asking for. And just, because one of the ladies who's on that committee, she says, I don't mean it as a criticism, but planning for a crisis based on what happened this past winter, that's something that needs to be looked at. So there was failure all across the board. I think we all know that, right? So, and that's now we're faced with an $11 million bill, and I think we owe it to the ratepayers, since that's who you work for, to look at every aspect of this and figure out, if there was anything. I'm not saying you did anything wrong, Jim, but I want to know that whatever happened during that time where we're stuck with this bill, and the fact that we didn't know what our cap was and what we were comfortable with, and hit that off switch, given the fact that they were warning us to start forecasting and get ready, I just want to know what steps we took. So the relationship I'm not concerned about. I get when they started, how they started, I get that. I just was more concerned about our internal processes that happened, where now we're passing on this very large bill. And it may not sound horribly bad, but I have an elderly lady who gave me 4 months, her past 4 months utility bills, and she has a fixed income of $1,100 a month. That's what she lives on. And she's delinquent. She's not sure how she's going to pay. She's having to make difficult choices. And so she's got a fuel cost adjustments for the last 4 months that average $50 a month. Doesn't sound like a lot of money to some of us in this room, but to her, she's wondering how she's going to pay this and get out of this hole. And that generation, they just stew on that. It's difficult. And I want her to know that whatever we're doing, working for her, that we're doing all the necessary things and taking all the necessary steps, so that we're not handing bills, large bills, to our ratepayers. And apparently we've been doing that for the last 12 months. We've had fuel cost adjustments for 12 months. We've had that.
We've had fuel cost adjustments for 50 years.
Okay, well, so I guess people want to understand why that is. You've heard the complaints. We got lower rates, but yet my bill's higher. So I just want to be transparent and clear why we have that, especially when energy costs, fuel, natural gas have been some of the lowest prices we've seen in a long time, right?
And I can answer that partially, sir.
Well, okay, just go back before January. I can help you.
Well, our base rate is calculated, the fuel cost that's in our base rate goes all the way back to when we were on coal.
Okay.
If we were to recalculate the rates and the rate base, at the actual cost of fuel, that's where the fuel cost adjustment comes in. Rather than go back and recalculate the rates, we have the fuel cost adjustment to do that for us.
Okay. Well, I'm just looking at the bill and just seeing how much her adjustments were, and they're high. And so I worry about folks like her.
And we are sensitive to that, and that's why we've said we will look at this month to month and
Well, I think that's
make it
why we
as-
need to stretch this out, Jim. I think we really need to stretch it out. If Springfield can do it for 24 months, what's our hurry? That's my concern. So I'm going to continue to ask these questions because the ratepayers are just confused, they're concerned, and I want to make sure that we did everything that was reasonable and responsible to do.
Mayor?
Yes.
Jim, so with the fuel cost adjustments, the number that we were talking about, 11 million, whatever, that large number, so IPL absorbed half of that? Was that with the proposal?
Well, actually, we paid the bill. So
Right.
we actually, the entire amount hit the reserves. What we have proposed is looking at small increments to put that into the fuel cost adjustment to recover that. But as was noted last time, summer's going to be a tough time, so we'll have to look at whether we do any at all in the summer, as opposed to stretching it out longer. And we're certainly open to a longer period. We haven't set a number as to how much total. I think that's a decision that has to be based on where the reserves are.
And if my memory serves me correct, yes, we paid the bill, so I think the discussion point was then how much will IPL absorb and how much will be passed on? Is that, my memory serve me correct on
And I
that?
think the answer to that is really how are we going to treat the reserve and how the loss to the reserves? How much of that do we want to try to rebuild? Because quite frankly, just as with the city finances, load is not increasing in the city as much as costs are. So the revenue versus cost remains a delicate balance. So without doing some cost recovery, how much of those reserves are we going to rebuild?
Correct. So I guess my main point is with the fuel cost being passed on, that's something that we have always done. But within this discussion point was how much would the city absorb? So we were anticipating, given how much reserve we want to have, we were not necessarily expecting the ratepayers to absorb all of that amount. But that's up for discussion. I think that was part of the spirit of the conversation
Right.
that we were having there. So within that spirit of the conversation, we weren't necessarily expecting the ratepayers to pick up the entire cost of that.
Again, it's going to be a question of where the fund balance is.
Right, correct.
Well, let me make this point. Every dollar we have is the ratepayers. I mean, every dollar that is in our fund came from the ratepayers. So, I mean, the way I understand it is we knew there was no way to pass $8 million. I mean, the bill's 11 million, but our regular bill is 2 or 3 million. So we're talking about an $8 to $9 million increase in this short period of time of, a couple of days. So to say, the city's absorbing it, no, we're not. I mean, that's still the ratepayers' money that we had to go spend. And what we're doing is saying, how much can we reasonably expect to start to recover on the billing cycles for this period of time through the fuel cost adjustment, because all of that extra expense was due to the cost of fuel, whether it's, not having the coal available, not having the wind available, not having the solar available, and then the oil and the gas. So, I mean, I just want to people to understand that. I mean, the city doesn't have money to pay this. This is the ratepayers' money. It comes from no other source other than, other than the ratepayers. So, as I said, unfortunately, the way our system is set up with utility assistance, people cannot qualify for utility assistance if they don't have a disconnect notice. So in order for people to access all this money that's currently available to assist them with bills that they are struggling to pay, we have to issue them a disconnect notice so that they can show that they are delinquent, and that's a requirement in order to access these funds. So this is not a, this is not the complete answer into how we're going to recover the $8 or $9 million that we got hit with without any warning. But we can't reasonably expect, I mean, you know, the bills that people are receiving where they have a $30 or $40 or $50 increase over what they anticipated having to pay, we can't make that $100.
Right.
So, you know, we'll just, and I think that's the reasonable answer, is we just have to look at this month to month, understand our community, and understand that when their bill goes up in the summertime, we can't reasonably expect them to absorb another $50 on top of that, or $100, or whatever that fuel cost would be. So, you know, I just don't think that we can, any of us, sit here and say, this is going to be the long-term answer. But, you know, I think the approach that we're taking is appropriate, to say we're going to slowly start getting some of this money back into our reserves where it's needed, so that without just devastating our ratepayers. There are other comments or
Madam Mayor?
questions? Yes,
Madam Mayor?
Councilman Huff?
Yes, I've taken a few things in on this. Mr. Nell, I would like to know how much that one unit being down, so we had 6, we only ran 5, what the cost of that was, what it cost us? You have an answer for that by chance?
I'll have to get back and see what that was. That unit typically puts out 12 to 15 megawatts if it's running. Now, we were also held back because of the problem in keeping the fuel tanks filled and getting deliveries. SPP did schedule us at lower output during a good portion of that period, so that we wouldn't run out of fuel and trip off. It was better to keep us running at a lower rate than to run us flat out and run out of fuel.
Right, and I understand that, but if we was notified February 1st, we shouldn't have even been close to running out of fuel. But another thing,
Councilman, we burned $2 million worth of fuel during that 5 days. But we were as fast as we could get it delivered, we were topping the tanks back up.
And so, you know, patience is my friend, because I've been promoting Wardzilla and some of these other things, and you kind of push it right to that track here about generation in this city. That we have found that, solar panels produce 0 and wind produce 0. Not that I'm against them. I just think that technology down the road will help them. But in this juncture in the road, patience has really been my friend, because we've shown, I don't think anybody in this city wants to see it on a 0 wind generation or 0 snow. I don't think this is quite the place. I know that I'm all about renewables too, but this is not the West Coast where the sun shines and the wind blows. And so this makes a very good point to our next juncture in the road here about generation. So I hope that we're using this as a lesson, that maybe mistakes in the past, that these things just aren't working, that we lean towards more looking at some other kind of generation Zilla, or, I don't know. I wish I could tell you that. But definitely it's helped me in my pursuit to figure out some generation in the city, and I appreciate you throwing them numbers out there because that really helped me. Number 3 of this that I heard you say is that, and which I've been saying for 3 years, and some council members listen, some don't, but that our revenues are pretty straight line. So we're sitting on this amount of money. And so as management team, that, we have to worry about our expenditures and our revenues, because our revenues are not going to change, evidently, and have shown that for a few decades here. So I think that that's part of the management team down there to figure that out. You keep saying, well, and I've heard this numerous times from you since you've been director, that, hey, revenues haven't changed. And I agree 100%. And that's the rough part of being a manager down there, because they're not changing. But by golly, them expenditures are. And so I'm hoping that you, being the manager that you are, that you're looking into that, because that's where you're going to have to go to figure this big puzzle out. And I don't know. It's a rough one. I understand you're trying, but that is, that's what we need to be looking at. But other than that, I heard some things here in the last, you say this is number 4 or whatever. I think Councilman Steinmeier brought that out. No one's accusing anybody of fraud. We're not looking at the relationship of SPP. I think this has been twisted around too much, that we're more interested in seeing the price gouging on the natural gas, some of the other utilities out there in Kansas. One of our formal assistant directors, they're looking at suing. They're not after SPP. They're not after anybody like that. It's the gas gouging and stuff like that. Not looking at fraud or anything like that. I think, to be a little bit misdirected, we're more interested in seeing why this happened with them. We understand we have to be members of SPP. We know the rules. But we're looking more down the road of what the gas company, the gas service people, and all these people did to cause this pain to us. So other than that, I don't have anything. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments or questions on this presentation?
Just briefly, Madam Mayor.
Uh-huh.
Mr. Nail, do you check the power generation on SPP? They have a website where they publish where the power generation comes from pretty regularly. Are you familiar with that at all?
Yes, sir. They have a dashboard that has what the wind penetration and showing what the mix of generation is.
Yeah, and every expert in the country, every person agrees this was an 85-year weather event, meaning it's a once in an 85-year event. Do you agree with that?
Some of the records broken were 100 years old.
All right. So since then, and you may not know this, and that's all right. I'll provide it to the council later, but there are a number of days that I've seen that wind and solar have made up to 50% or more of the power generated in SPP in a day.
SPP's record is 73%.
Of wind and solar
Correct.
in a like a day.
In a given hour.
In a given hour. So it's by hour.
So
Okay.
73% penetration.
I just wanted to be clear about that because Councilmember Huff appears to think that we need to put power generation in place to provide power for a 5-day event that happened once in 85 years, when on the flip side, I see that there are other avenues to making power that are alternatives to fossil fuels and have been a huge part of power generation, increasingly so, at least according to SPP.
Correct. Incrementally, it has been, like I said, is the record penetration that they've shown is 73%, but that same 27,000 megawatts produced 0 on some hours. So it's the variable nature is that's the issue that we have to deal with.
Absolutely. which is why the MPUA recommends generally a broad base of sources.
Yes, sir.
Is get as much variance as you can in case one of them's not working very good. Right?
Correct, sir.
Thank you. That's all.
Thank you.
Yes, I have a comment on that. First of all, Mr. Nell, I want to know when you can turn that on and when you can turn that off, since Mr. Hobart has become an expert in this. I would really like to know, during the middle of the night, can you turn off the wind and can you turn off the solar and can you turn it on? That's the biggest thing that I'm talking about here. I'm not talking about whether it's good or bad. I said he's making a real good case for this in the Midwest. And I'd like to know where that switch is at.
As you know, sir, there's not one.
I don't want to complicate and confuse our topics, which are many at Independence Power and Light. The conversation about generation has been going on for a number of years. So I don't want it to be construed that this is a conversation that came up because of an event that is very rare, we hope. It has not happened in 85 or 100 years. We all know our planet is different than it was 85 or 100 years ago. I don't think there's any dispute about that. Our weather patterns are different. Our technology is different. A lot of things are different. And I would betcha that it's not going to be another 85 years before we have a similar event, either caused by extreme heat or the extreme cold that we saw. But I just don't want anybody to get confused that this discussion about generation just came up because of this event. This is something that the council's been working on, for at least 4 or 5 years. Because we know that our equipment eventually is going to need to be replaced. But in some fashion, we don't know when. And we don't know what all the options are going to be. So I just wanted to clarify that point.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I agree with you. I don't want this to turn into anything other than the fact that you say many years, I'm going to say a couple of decades ago, we should have been having this conversation to start replacing CTs. I mean, we're living on borrowed time. That's not our words. That was the last council's word. That did nothing. And so we've got to be leaders in this endeavor to get these things done, Jim. I mean, wouldn't you agree? We're living on borrowed time with these CTs. And for us to have, be a part of SPP, look, SPP last year reported 31% of all their power was from renewable. That's fine. We need to have a balanced approach. But I want us to get on target, on track, and I want us to come to the realization. We have 5 CTs that were functioning. We had 6 out there. We have got to decide for the ratepayers of this city. We've got to start making some hard decisions. What are we going to do? Or are we going to have this discussion in September when we have another big summer event that puts us on notice again, right? I mean, you don't want to keep coming up here and giving these answers. Let's figure out what we need to do to get our city back into the power game and have some control of our municipal power system, right? So that's all. I want us to use this moment to go, folks, we can say it was a 100-year event, 80-year event. I don't care. The fact is, we muddled through, and thank God we did. Must be a lot of people praying in this city because we were living on good graces to get through this. So I hope that the council will begin to look at this and say, yes, hard decisions need to be made about generating power again. We talk about capital investments. This is an important piece of it. Jim, you play a very vital role in how we move forward this economy. So I just want us to get in line with the real need. I don't care if we see eye to eye on it. We all ought to at least come to the resolution or the resolve that we're at least 2 decades behind the game in planning for the next stage for IPL, and I'd like to see us take some initiative, get along, figure out where the common ground is, and move forward. Ratepayers deserve that.
Is there
Madam
anything
Mayor?
else? Yes.
I would simply like to thank Mr. Neal for all his hard work and all his answers to our questions.
Anytime.
Thank you. Okay, this moves on to staff reports. The first is an idea that I brought forward to the city manager regarding an honorary street designation for the late Charlie Franklin Jr. Mr. City Manager, would you like to share our discussion with the council?
Yeah, you know, I think Noland Road, Madam Mayor, members of the council, is well known not only to our community, but to our region, well known as its, you know, place in the region for the Miracle Mile and all the folks who've traversed it over the years. Certainly there's been a lot of individuals who played a key role in that development, but recently the mayor brought a concept to me that we felt would be appropriate for the council to just discuss at the study session level. But a number of our peer cities around us will tend to honor people who have made a significant civic contribution in their community with honorary street sign designation. So officially the road remains the same, but there will be a placard affixed, you know, at different intervals across the street corridor that honor part or all of that street for individual or individuals. And in this case, Mayor thought one of the individuals who's played a role, Charlie Franklin Sr. And Mayor, I think you would do well to explain a little bit more about Charlie's contributions over the years than I can, but that was the bureaucratic answer to the conversation that we had.
Well, I think many people who have lived in this community for a period of time knew Charlie Franklin Jr., who is passed away just a few weeks ago at the age of 95, nearly 96 years old, who spent the entirety of his life, other than the time that he served in the military here in Independence, and was a key component, certainly the most influential component in the development of what we now know as Nolan Road. In addition to many other business ventures and philanthropic ventures that Mr. Franklin and his family have been involved with. His wife, Elaine, their marriage of over 70 years, their 4 children who they raised in Independence, and their 12 grandchildren, mostly, who were raised and educated here in Independence. They made tremendous contributions to our community, not only as investors and business developers, land developers, certainly a number of real estate ventures that they have been involved with, professional services, and not least of all, a tremendous contribution to youth sports, sponsoring many youth sports teams over the decades. I, as many of you did, knew Mr. Franklin and learned much more about him after his passing and the many, many contributions they made to this city. So, as city manager said, we see certainly in cities around us that many times they will honor people who have made great contributions with some sort of honorary designation, as we did recently for Mayor Reimel with the suite at the Cable Dahmer Arena. You know, we can go all around the city and see buildings, streets, schools, so on and so forth, that have been named for outstanding individuals. So I'm certainly not recommending or suggesting that we rename Nolan Road. I'm suggesting that we honor Mr. Franklin's contributions and his family's contributions to this community by placing an honorary street sign at certain different intervals along Nolan Road in his honor, and wanted to bring that forward to the council for discussion of any thoughts regarding this suggestion. Okay, Mr. City Manager, would you take the necessary steps to bring this forward to the council for official adoption, and any logistics that would need to take place.
Yeah, we'll take the appropriate steps to bring it forward for the council's consideration.
Okay, great. Next is the Independence Police Department recruiting and retention update. Councilman Huff, did you want to kick this off, or did you want the staff to give a report?
I would just soon the staff go ahead with the report. I just had a few things that I wanted to talk to them about.
Okay, very good.
Okay. Mayor Weir, members of the council, I'm Ken Jarnigan, Deputy Chief with the Police Department. And I'm going to give a brief overview and a timeline regarding our current vacancies. And then I'll discuss our recruiting strategies that we've done here in the last year or so. In 2019, the Police Department lost 7 officers due to the following: one termination, 5 resignations, and 1 medical retirement. During that year, 1 certified officer was hired and 2 recruit officers were sent to the Kansas City Academy. In 2020, the police department lost 22 officers due to the following: 1 deceased, 1 termination, 13 resignations, 2 medical retirements, and 5 retirements. 3 certified officers were hired and 9 recruit officers were hired and started the Kansas City Academy in August of 2020. Unfortunately, only 2 graduated. In February of 2021, and an additional 1 was cycled back to the class in January. He missed too much time because of COVID, and so he was cycled back to the January Academy class. Upon the graduation in February of 2021, one of the 2 that actually graduated, her husband happened to be in the military and he got reassigned to Hawaii, and so she ended up going with him. So now we have, in the field training program, out of this class of 9, we actually have 1 that's going through the field training program. 7 of our resignations in 2020 occurred between July and November of 2020, when the civil unrest and anti-police rhetoric played center stage on our daily news cycles. In 2021, thus far, we have lost 5 officers due to the following: 1 retirement, 4 medical retirements. We're anticipating 1 more medical retirement coming up here within the next week or so. And unfortunately, we've had another officer injured, and it appears that the initial prognosis indicates that he may be also another medical retirement. There will be 2 more retirements later in May, as well as 1 resignation, and 5 more officers have indicated that they will be retiring by the end of the year. 3 certified officers were hired in February of 2021, and 10 recruit officers started the Kansas City Academy in January of 2021. We have lost 3 out of this academy thus far. The recruits have a July graduation date. In the meantime, we've explored other options as far as other academies. We've hired 1 recruit officer out of the Blue River Academy. He just graduated on April 29th. 2 recruit officers from the Drury University Academy in Springfield, Missouri will graduate this Saturday. 2 recruit officers have been hired out of the UCM Academy in Warrensburg, and they will graduate next month. We currently have 18 officer vacancies under the general fund and 16 vacancies under the use tax fund. By the end of May, our general fund vacancies will increase to 22. We've had 8 medical retirements in the last 3 years, and this has definitely had an impact, and unfortunately the trend appears to be continuing. In March, I had a conversation with Penny Thomas from Loggers, and she stated that the medical retirements are a trend that they have noticed throughout the entire Loggers system, and they are monitoring this. To compound our current issues, unfortunately, we have 49 officers that are eligible for retirement in the next 5 years. So let me talk now a little bit about recruitment and what we've been doing in the last few years. In 2018, we had it was a civilian position that did a lot of our background investigations and took care of a lot of our hiring. We made this an officer's position. Officer Rick Remington transferred to our professional standards unit. And in conjunction with Sergeant Freeman, they review all of our applications for not just police officer, but every position within the department. They liaison with the City Human Resources Department regarding testing and hiring. At that time, we were outsourcing both our polygraph and our psychological examinations. And a lot of times this would delay our hiring for up to 2 months, sometimes 2.5 months. Officer Remington went to a 17-week polygraph school in Pennsylvania in 2019 and became certified as a polygraph examiner. And this has had a tremendous impact as far as speeding up our hiring process. In 2019, numerous officers volunteered to serve as recruiting officers, and Sergeant Freeman coordinated locations for the recruiting teams to go for recruiting. The teams traveled to every police academy in the state, excluding the Missouri Highway Patrol Academy, Kansas City, St. Louis Metro, St. Louis County, and St. Charles. They have their own academies. They won't allow other agencies to come in and poach out of their academy. The recruiters traveled to locations such as Farmington, Springfield, and St. Joe, just to name a few. In addition to academies, the recruiters went to colleges and universities, as well as job fair locations. Academies in other states, such as Arkansas and Kansas, were contacted regarding their curriculums, and Missouri Post was contacted regarding out-of-state academy hours transferring to Missouri. Kind of a tricky situation. Missouri Post assigns, depending on the curriculum, they assign certain points. So you have, say, a recruit that just went through an academy in Arkansas. He may or may not have to attend an academy again if he were to come to Missouri. It just depends on the curriculum that was taught at their existing academy. In 2020, the recruiting efforts continued until March of 2020 when the COVID pandemic shut everything down, and colleges and academies went virtual or hybrid, and in-person recruiting was not allowed. In May of 2020, of course, the events in Minnesota began the anti-police sentiment throughout the country, and the defund the police mantra became prevalent. In August of 2020, in-person recruiting picked back up when we sent officers to the Central Missouri Police Academy recruiting fair. Since August, IPD recruitment teams have participated in the following events. In November, we attended the Missouri Western State University Law Enforcement Academy, as well as the Drury University Law Enforcement Academy in Springfield. The Law Enforcement Training Institute at the University of Missouri in Columbia in December. The Central Missouri Police Academy Recruitment Fair in February of 2021. The MCC Blue River Police Academy mock interviews, February of 2021. The Missouri Western State University Law Enforcement Academy, March of 2021. Northwest Missouri State Criminal Justice Program, March of 21. The Central Missouri Criminal Justice and Criminology Showcase, April of 21. And the Oklahoma Wesleyan University in April of 21. In the beginning this year, the Lincoln University in Jefferson City, which is a predominantly minority university, was approved through Missouri Post for a police academy through their university. They're in the process of getting that up and running. We have one officer who's volunteered to be the point of contact to work out recruiting events with that university. IPD has worked in conjunction with city HR to streamline our hiring process. The police officer job posting remains open until filled. IPD is testing each month for police officer. We unfortunately only test between 5 and 13 each month because that's about all that shows up. There's a vetting process regarding the testing in which all the applicants are screened, and those that have obvious issues are not invited to test. Now, other agencies in the area will test every applicant. However, and prior to vetting them, however, many times they have the same results that we do. Other recruiting efforts. So police officer and other department positions are posted on Missouri Post website, Indeed.com, PoliceOne.com, PoliceJobsInfo.com. High school criminal justice programs within Missouri receive civilian job postings, such as in dispatch, detention, and the records unit. Military recruitment, we maintain active posting with the out-processing facilities as a prospective employer. We participate in giving GI Bill benefits to current and past military personnel. And we attend job fairs for members reaching the end of their duty tours. IPDjobs.com is linked to the city hiring website, as well as a recruiting video on that same site. We developed recruiting buzz cards and have issued those to our officers to pass out for recruiting efforts. Our recent FOP contract was updated to increase the lateral hiring pay range from 4 to 8 years and giving credit per time at other agencies. So currently, this new contract takes effect in July. Currently on our contract, our FOP agreement, say we had an officer from Blue Springs that had 6 years on the job, and they wanted to move over to Independence. We would not start them at a 6-year officer. We'd start them at a maximum of a 4-year officer. By moving this up to a maximum of 8 years, we're hoping that this will entice other certified officers to come to IPD. During the fall of 2020, the FOP in Minnesota was contacted regarding interest from any of their membership in relocating to Independence. A plan was developed to assemble a team of officers to travel to Minnesota and conduct testing, interviews, and hiring as quickly as possible. After several inquiries, we never received any response from the Minnesota FOP. During the early fall of 2020, the Kansas City FOP was also contacted due to ongoing public conversations regarding the reducing of KCPD funding. The Kansas City FOP was advised of the current vacancies at IPD. We received 2 applications from former KCPD officers. One was hired in February of 2021, and the other was not hired. Between Thanksgiving and Christmas of 2020, the police department ran recruiting ads on a local radio channel. The radio station also ran a mobile advertising in the Power and Light District during the same time frame. Recruiting ad displayed on the electronic billboard out at the event center. Based on feedback from our department members, we modified our existing appearance policy regarding tattoos and beards. IPD and city leadership staff met with a marketing firm during the beginning of 2021 to discuss this firm's capabilities and their experience in police recruiting. We presented to the city manager's office the budget this next year for part-time positions in our detention unit. The purpose of this is to recruit high school seniors, 18 years old, who have just completed high school. They have to wait, and they're interested in being a police officer, but they have to wait till the age of 21. This gives them a position that we can help try to mentor these individuals until they reach the age of attending an academy at the age of 21. The Fort Osage CTC program, we've had some success with them in the last year and a half. We have hired 5 of their graduates that have gone through their program. 3 are currently working in our dispatch, and 2 are currently working in our detention unit. So far, they've been very good employees. The CTC program is proving to be a very fine program. And as the city manager mentioned earlier, the cadet program is what we're looking at here for the future. So some of our recruiting challenges. The continued anti-police rhetoric is very difficult to overcome. 2 weeks ago, I had a conversation with a Fort Osage football player who's going to college on a football scholarship. I asked him if he had any interest in being an officer. He said, you know, I've thought about that, but I don't think I want to come to work every day and be called a racist. So that's definitely having an impact on some of our recruiting. Our applicant pool, drug use and poor work history are the 2 biggest disqualifiers during every hiring process. These are standards that we cannot deviate from. There's an article last week regarding the Atlanta Police Department and the recruiting and hiring efforts. The article indicated that 92% of applicants who began filling out a waiver packet, which is basically a background packet where we get our information to do background investigations. And this is consistent with what we're seeing too. Anyway, 92% of the applicants who began filling it out failed to complete it. And this is consistent again with what we're seeing. During one of our recent hiring processes, we had 124 people applied for a police officer, and only 99 turned the personal history packets in. Of those that were turned in, 25 were inaccurate or incomplete. We made several attempts to have them come and correct those and provide the accurate information before they were disqualified. You've seen around the country recent articles regarding manpower shortages in Philadelphia, New York, Seattle, and others. This indicates that this is a national issue and not just an Independence, Missouri issue. However, again, the continued rhetoric regarding qualified immunity is also causing a challenge. Many of our current IPD officers have indicated that they will leave the profession completely if qualified immunity is eliminated. And I, by the way, am one of those who will as well. Low enrollment at college academy programs. Blue River on April 29th graduated 4 recruits from their nighttime class. Their daytime class, we hired one of those recruits. The daytime class had somewhere around 10. We had no applications from their daytime class. Another issue that's posing a challenge for us, other area departments offering hiring bonuses. Excelsior Springs offers $2,250 for a hiring bonus, Grandview $3,000, Riverside $10,000. We had not one of our officers that resigned last year, retired early so that he could benefit from a $10,000 hiring bonus. Currently, the city manager's office is in the process of developing a hiring bonus plan. So in summary, low number of qualified applicants makes this a buyer's market for all the serious applicants. During our interview panels that we've had with our officers participate in interviewing prospective applicants, they're reporting that all these applicants are doing is just shopping around which department offers them the best deal. Basically, it turns into they're interviewing us and we're not interviewing them. The volume of activity that IPD officers encounter each day is only rivaled in the area by KCPD on the Missouri side. I teach part-time at the Blue River Academy, and I've asked numerous recruits, how come you guys don't apply at Independence? Like, we don't know if we can make, you guys are too busy. We don't know if we can make it there. So that is definitely the volume of work that our officers are encountering is also an issue. That's all I have as far as our recruiting update. I'm open to any questions.
Thank you. Councilman Huff?
Yes, thank you, Assistant Chief there. Hey, I guess part of my deal is with this, and I'm glad you come up with all these numbers because I know it's quite a crisis, and I've been hearing via the grapevine that we have some officers also that's going to resign and go to KCP&L. It's kind of a market right now. One of the things, and I've always promoted this even 3 years ago when I mentioned this and was kind of chuckled at that I didn't know what I was talking about, unfortunately. As far as that goes, and that's before this crisis, I know we have a big one out there, but something that I've been approached with, I know we're trying to recruit people, and so, and we're doing bonuses and stuff like that. But one thing that I was thinking that maybe we should look at is possibly what's it going to take to retain the ones we have here. We have them going out of here rapidly. Signed the thing for a couple guys that's been here for a few years here recently for retirement. Just trying to think, besides the recruiting, is how do we retain these guys? And I went through that phase down at Power and Light years and years ago where we couldn't get anybody. And the only way we got them in there is by paying them money. And lo and behold, now we have a tremendous amount of guys that apply and everything else. Plus we was able to retain the ones we had there because you have to have a mix of young, old, in between for the training purposes. I will have to say, of all the things I guarantee this council will agree upon, we have differences on a lot of things, but this is one thing that we will not disagree, and that's public safety. We're all committed to that. This city has to get police officers in here no matter what it takes. I think we need, I know you guys that signed a agreement with the city here a while back, a week ago or so, whatever. It's immaterial. And that, I just think that we can't just go out here and be the playing like Blue Springs and Lee Summit. We have to be up and beyond these people. We have to offer these young people, these guys that are still there, to keep them there, something more, because I'm not worried about the rest of these cities. I'm worried about Independence and how we retain these officers and how we recruit new officers. And maybe, I know through the years, a lot of people have come back for inspectors and stuff like that for public works that have retired. I'm just wondering if we looked into maybe grabbing a couple of these officers to come back in and run a paddy wagon or something, not be out in the field, because I realize at 55 years old, you're not going to want to wrestle a 21-year-old, and I understand that. But maybe we can put them in positions to relieve, like the paddy wagon guy, or some detective work or drug unit where they can do something on the backside to kind of relieve, so we get some more officers and boots on the ground and get them out here. I did see some officers doing traffic last week on Lee Summit Road, and I was glad to see that, because traffic has gotten way out of hand, and I understand our resources are very limited. But I just, like I said, I think this council, any council, is going to agree. Public safety is number one. I mean, when we were elected, that's our number one priority here. And I myself, speaking for myself, that I just think we have to step outside and do whatever it takes. It doesn't matter. I don't think that the money is the problem when it comes to the safety of our public and our children out here. And we need to look way beyond what's going on out here. We have to be the number one recruiter. We can't sit back and go, well, Blue Springs makes $24 an hour and our policemen make $24.75. We have to be way beyond that. If we're going to get these guys, they got 8 and only 5 of them are making it. We want them 5. Something else that come to my attention, and when you talk about cadets, when a cadet does not fulfill their obligations, if we pay for their schooling and everything, I know it, and the electrical engine part of it, that if you work out of the hall, you have to serve so many years. If you don't, then you have to pay them back. Are these cadets that are failing us not fulfilling their obligations to the city? Are we getting the money back from them, or what? Not that I know it's already hard enough. I'm just asking because some people have talked to me about this, about some of these obligations going out, that we train people and then they go, we don't have anything that holds them here, so we might train them and they run off to Springfield or wherever. So I just want to make sure that, that they're fulfilling their end of it too. But my biggest point other than that is we got to go all out and start. We're not, what we've got going right now, I know you guys are working very, very hard, but it's not working because we're not getting anybody here. We have to do more. And this city council and our mayor, I guarantee you, will back anything that you guys can come up with to get more officers here. They're leaving like unreal amounts, and we can't let this happen to our city. But that's all I have. I appreciate your hard work and all the statistics, because it really showed us what's happening out there.
I can address a couple of the questions that you have there, Chief Halsey. The one about paying back, no. Now, should we revisit that? Because I'm going to date this several years ago when I went and asked that question and was told by the legal department then that no, we will not do that. That should be relooked at. But I will tell you, there is a benefit too of somebody that is very situational. I mean, there's some that, you're happy that they came forward and said, hey, this ain't for me. It's not what I thought while in the academy, because it doesn't put us in a hole down the road. But I can tell you, I mean, certainly with everything going on, and even before all this stuff going on, our officers, every employee over there earns every penny that they make, because we are busy. And like Deputy Chief Jarnigan said, the problem is nowadays, people would want to come here to Independence because we were busy.
Right.
We have specialized units. Well, unfortunately, when you have this many vacancies, you can't move people internally to specialized units. you have to use specialized units to backfill patrol. And a lot of people are just looking for the easy, a lot of, I'm not gonna say younger, but a lot of applicants today are looking for that easier, why come here and do 30 calls for service when you can go to another agency around here and maybe answer 5? So yeah, it's a big problem.
So, Chief Halsey, what can we do to change this? I mean, I realize we're in a hard spot, and I totally know you guys are working your tails off to try to recruit, but we have to do more. And I'm looking for you guys to tell us what, as council members, we need to do to help this further along. We need all of them we can get.
Yeah, so if I knew that answer, I'd probably get rich, because every police chief and every agency in the United States right now is asking the same question. I will tell you, there's some agencies that say, well, hiring bonuses do make a difference, and there's some that'll tell you it's not making a difference. Right. The average time that a younger person joins law enforcement, I think I've said this before, is 5 years, and they're off doing something else. I'm not talking about everybody, but the difference is, I'd say a lot of people are not looking for careers in this current state of time. They're looking for what's next. So, trust me, I guarantee you we think about this every night.
Sure, I guarantee you do. But how about how we retain these guys that are leaving? I realize some are on medical, and that's a problem. And I realize they're 55, but if we thought about giving them a little better job, so maybe we can release some of the younger guys to beat, feed, or do we have any incentive to keep people?
Well, to answer that question, I'll go back to your other, which I think is a very valuable question that you asked about retirees. The problem with the logger system is, every time I've checked on that, I've been told no, you cannot come back and do police work. Now, we have hired a part-time position in our evidence room who's a retired officer, and she's a great employee. But what I've been told time and time again is, no, you cannot come back and do that. Now, we have paid reserves before, but I'm gonna be very honest with you, especially, when you do this job for 30, 35 years, a lot of people just want to disappear. So, but, we have paid them in the past, but I think if you do that as a reserve, that we need to look at what's an equitable, pay to do that. And again, I'll just say one more time, the men and women, not just officers, civilian employees, support employees, they earn every penny every day that they make. So.
Madam Mayor?
Yes, Councilman Steinmeier.
Chief Halsey, I'm sitting here, I'm listening to the struggles, the challenges. Policing, in my mind, and I'm not a good public thinker. I'm more of a private business side. We have a branding issue. Policing needs a new brand. I mean, they're getting beat from every side. They're battered, and I wonder. One of the things that Deputy Chief Jarnigan said was, applicants are interviewing us. I wonder how our patrolmen and those shift commanders are feeling if maybe the patrolmen own the shift commanders, because we're trying to keep everybody happy so they don't want to go someplace else. And being a veteran, when you turn command upside down, you got problems. And that's a struggle that we're probably facing. One of the things I would propose at some point is that we do a survey internally. Not an FOP, not a city one. We hire an outside group and we put together a survey that talks about or asks questions about branding. How are people feeling? What do they see it? How do they see it down the road? I mean, there's research we can do to get involved, but I worry about the morale of our patrol right now. They're tired.
We do too.
They're doing a ton of things, but that's but we don't know what they're feeling if they feel like they're talking to you versus talking to someone independent of you. And then we begin to understand and get a sense of where that brand is and where we want it to go. I don't think just throwing tons of money at it is going to solve the problem, although it will help. because I think you and I have talked about this before. If you can't fill positions, you just start putting zeros on until someone says yes. But that doesn't always solve the problem. That could be a short-term solution. And of course, with the current people that we have in the department, you don't want to offend that these guys are making more than me, and you get into that whole thing. I would suggest we approach it differently, and it's just an idea that we should talk about, maybe consult a little bit on. But I think doing some type of survey internally and maybe externally on what type of police brand does Independence want?
And it's getting dated now, but we spent about $30,000 when I was a deputy chief. So that's probably going on 6 years ago, so it is dated.
Yeah.
We try to rebrand and do the things that you're talking. I'm not saying I'm opposed to that. Anything right now that we can try. Because I think typically you're gonna see officers when they first start this job, I always tell them, you're not gonna remember this, but I'm not worried about you right now as far as your burnout. Burnout usually occurs 7 years. I think it's a lot sooner for us here because of the volume and the things that we see and have to deal with every day.
Yeah, you guys do real bad guy work, right? So, I mean, there's bad guys that live amongst us that we have to take on. But but the dynamic of your profession has changed so much.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know,
yes.
political correctness is garbage when it comes to policing, and everybody thinks that policing needs to be, we need that changed. I think the judicial system has put policing in a very bad way, and I think that's a big struggle too. But I don't think we should live on the dated. We should look at the current, and or we can just continue doing what we're doing, which is getting no results at all. But I think investing in what we can do, should do, what the opinions are, what the cadets are feeling, what your patrol's feeling, what your command staff's feeling, and then how the general public sees us.
Yeah, I think we're fortunate here. I think, I see
Very supportive.
I see it
city.
every day, yes.
Yeah,
Every day
very
I see that.
supportive.
But,
But if
don't
there's
disagree
more
with
that
anything
we
you're
can
saying. We're
do,
open because, now more than ever, I lose a lot of sleep on not just the vacancies, but the existing people out there doing this job and getting in a bad situation. And
Yeah.
what can result from that. And I think the national lens is, they want people to think this happens every day, where bad things are happening, people are getting, killed by the police, and that's not the case.
No.
So, but going back to what you said, and that's what we've been working with the city manager's office about. I've talked to Meg about this, John Simon, we have one PIO, but we have to have more to share the good stories. Anything that you read right now about recruitment, that's the number one thing they're saying. You have to outdo all the negativity by the good stories, and that's about the only suggestion that they have on every article I read about it at this point, so.
it's tough to know what your messaging is if we don't know what the filters are.
Yep.
What they're running it through when they hear it, because it can be the most positive stories, out there, but it's still a cop, right? I mean, you got that attitude still, and so anything we can do, to help be innovative or just go in a different direction, I think we should at least talk about. That's what companies do when they repurpose, they rebrand. And our purpose maybe needs to be more clearly defined. Maybe it needs a new something, but I know your purpose. Everybody knows your purpose, but maybe the messaging, that brand needs to change. Just an idea. I mean, that's how the private sector would approach it too, so.
So Chief, I think Councilman Steinmeier triggered a thought for me. My first involvement with the city was working on public safety back in 2003. And when Chief Halsey was a young patrolman. And the tax that was passed in 2004, that was renewed, the Prop P, the now nonprofit organization, the Independence Police Foundation. And I know that the men and women who work in our police department know how much this community supports them, not only with just their sentiments, but with their money, that they repeatedly have taxed themselves to be able to support the police department and public safety in this city. I think we need to call on those same people to help tell our story. The morale issues that caused the voters to put in the public safety tax back in 2004 were different than the morale issues that you're facing today. It was they didn't have adequate equipment, they didn't have adequate facilities, they didn't have adequate vehicles, uniforms, I mean, all of those things. I mean, the situation was deplorable. And the community stepped forward, and the community told that story, and the community stepped forward to remedy the situation to the best of its ability. So the branding has always been negative. I mean, it's more negative now than it ever has been, but you know, in all of those campaigns, we fought negative impressions of police. And, you know, that's just exacerbated now by the issues that you've already discussed, and I believe that's absolutely true. And I've talked to our officers, I've talked to officers in other jurisdictions, and the story is the same. And, you know, the belief that you can't throw enough money at the problem to totally solve the problem. But I think this is an opportunity to call on our community, on those volunteers, which we have dozens, if not hundreds, of people in this community who are either official volunteers for the police department or are just, you know, supporters. And you know who many of them are, and there's many more out there that we don't know. But I think that would be, we need those people now.
Yeah.
The community has always stepped up when IPD has needed them, and we need to call on them to help us tell the story of IPD now.
Yeah, I think, you know, the foundation that you brought up, I think that's a good start. I think that you're gonna see, we're already seeing a lot of moving forward on with that group. And I think that's the other thing too. Yeah, you know, it's not, people are important. We have to recruit, we have to retain. But the second part of that is technology. That is gonna help our officers. That's gonna help our detectives. That's gonna help a lot of different people solve crimes and be on top of this. So that's gonna be huge. And I was gonna also comment that, yeah, when I was young, I had dark hair, but you can see now how we have grayed up quite a bit, so.
Well, I just think that that story needs to be told, and the things that our officers and police personnel used to be able to do that created a lot of community goodwill and those relationships that so many of us formed over the years with our police department and individual officers, they just don't have time to do that stuff anymore. I mean, there used to be, it felt like there was much more interaction with the neighborhood groups and the communities, and I know that we do that, and obviously this year has put a major dent in being able to do those community, those neighborhood watch meetings, or just, meeting the officers at the Englewood substation, those types of things used to be pretty routine, and we just don't have the resources to be able to allow our officers to do that kind of personal getting to know the business owners and the community in the way that maybe we used to. So the community needs to step in and do that. And we need to, the foundation's a great place to start, but it can go well beyond that,
Yeah.
I believe. Yes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Deputy Chief, for your detailed report. It was pretty detailed, and thank you for putting that together. First, I want to say that I've talked with Chief Halsey here over the past couple of weeks, and if the council does not object, I'm going to meet with the officers, and I'll get with you. I did get your email with the schedule, and I'll get with you on what the best time to do that, to get down there at the shift change and to talk to the men and women down there that, we do have your backs, that we are here. And I think some of the problem, or actually a lot of the problem that we've seen across this country is the legislative body has folded when an officer has acted in a correct manner and the pressure put onto the legislative body, they folded. And I would like to convey to our men and women that we will not be that. I think that is highly important, and you and I have had some discussions that I think that needs to be said, and I plan on going down there without objection to say that to those men and women down there. So with the retirement, did I hear you say 49 officers will be within the next 4 years?
49 will be eligible.
So when I first got on the council, was on the Audit and Finance Committee, we were looking at that tsunami wave, that silver tsunami that's going to transpire, go through the whole city. So that is something that we've been looking at, and for sure, given the lens of what's taking place nationally, we need to really work to try to get what you're doing to get those recruitments here. So anything we can do to try to help out with that, for sure, we're here. And Chief, you and I have had some dialogues with the nature of our citizenry's change, especially on the northwest side of town with our Hispanic community. You mentioned that the Minnesota FOP reached out to us to go there, and
We reached out to them.
we reached out to them. Do we have that ability to reach out to maybe some of the states in FOP down south that may have that bilingual unit, or those individuals that can come?
Yeah, the only problem with that, the only problem that we're going to encounter is Missouri Post, and whether, especially if we're targeting certified officers, whether they'll have to come back and go through an academy again. A lot of people don't want to have to do that. And so it's going to be a case by case. But if we're grabbing people who are not certified, then yeah, and I think, quite honestly, that's our next step. I think we need to start recruiting outside of the state.
And I think that's, if you're asking, I think that's what you're all hitting on is important. That, post, they have to be, strict guidelines, but, what can we do? What can they do to help not just us, but other agencies where, somebody, he or she can come here as an officer and to, I guess, recognize the academies they've been through and make that easier. Because we can get the list, but there is some transferable states, but you just have to take a written test and that's it. But that's going to be huge for somebody who has a family. Going back through, that's like going to a different agency and going through the FTO progress program again as well. So.
Sure. As we target maybe some of those communities that are less supportive of officers, they might be willing to do that. They want to stay in that career field, of course.
The ones that are less what?
Supportive, those communities, those legislative bodies that are less supportive of their officers.
That's a lot. No.
It is. Well, it's a thought. Is there any way that we can put a higher premium on those individuals that are bilingual?
We do. You do. We have several. I think we have maybe 5. But if you put in, we have city policy says but I'm going to be honest with you, I think that can be improved. And I know several of them that do this and they don't put in for that. They just do it out of the goodness of their heart. And I've asked one of them here recently to, how does other agencies that they came from, how do they do that? I think that's important. That need is not going to go away. We all know that. So.
Sure. Well, thank you. I sure appreciate the report you guys given, and I'll get with you on working that schedule with you.
And I was going to say, we're our own worst enemy. I seen one today. Officers do not want to, they don't want, our officers here do stuff all the time that are good. I just seen one today that was shared with me that the officer wanted to remain confidential, and it's a great story.
Yeah,
But he pleaded, he's like, I don't want it.
I know, they don't want that.
No, but we just got to figure out a way how to,
Well, they don't want to toot their own horn, but, there's a way to do that. That is more community-based, I think.
The last,
Yeah, we can't afford to give them a day off.
Right.
yeah, it's hard to, you know, I try not to leave this on a sober note, but I think it's important you all know this too. The divorce rates right now in law enforcement in this area is going through the roof. And I've talked to these other agencies and asked them, do they know why? They don't know why either, so.
Madam Mayor.
What- Yes.
Just to say to Chief that, this is not just your issue. This is really a citywide issue. We've talked about our budget, our economy. Having a healthy, vibrant police department is important to community development, it's important to being attractive to new families, capital improvements, people that want to come here and start companies know that we have a good, healthy police department. So I don't want you to feel alone in this process. It's very important to this city that we figure out how to manage this issue with you. And we're not dumping it on you. Don't want you to feel that way. If you need support, help in any way, I think you know my phone number by
Yes.
now. And even though, I'm part of the silver, whatever he says it is, I can still hear my phone and I do answer it, so.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, they earn every penny, and I wish we, had the ability to give every officer and every citizen, more money. That's important, but, I think a lot of it is honestly, a lot of people, not just in Independence and the Kansas City area, but other agencies across the nation, they're just done. They're done because of all these, and we're just one incident away from other officers just saying, I'm done. If we lose the qualified immunity, you're gonna have people mass exodus out of here, which I don't blame them. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
On the, as far as the bilingual, that's citywide as well. That's not just a police department, that's a citywide policy.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, gentlemen, for coming in.
Appreciate it. I'm going to end on a positive note. We were going to show these videos, Meg, but I think maybe we'll wait till next week. It's been a long evening. So we had 2 fabulous videos that were produced by our volunteers on our branding committee around Truman's birthday, and they're really great, and we want to show them, but I don't want to keep us much longer. But I did have one little quick presentation to make. We have a 5-year service pin that is being awarded, which was supposed to happen in April, but now it's happening in May, to Councilman John Perkins. So here's your 5-year pin. And I know you just had a quick announcement that you wanted to make before we adjourn.
Yeah, just one real quick announcement, not to make a long meeting longer. May 15th is Care for the Square. It's time to spruce up the area by sweeping, planting, scrubbing, painting, etc. We will start the day in Liberty Lounge at 9 a.m., but you can join us at any time. Or if you're not available on the 15th, you can help when you are available. Just ask for a task and we can help out. Liberty Lounge is just right across the street from the 2-story parking garage and right next to the Independence Square Association offices.
Okay, thank you very much. Spruce up the square. Mr. City Manager, anything else this evening?
Nothing tonight.
Okay, we are adjourned.